Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Zeke-ollege football. I can already tell what the comments are going to say. Hey, what's with the new background? What's with the new location? There was something that happened at my school where I could not be in my normal recording spot. So this is what I'm going to do in the meantime. Sorry if you don't like the new setup, but it will just be temporary. Um, but let's get started. It was a very eventful week nine. It told us a lot about some of the teams that we didn't really know as much about, some of the teams that were in question. But it was also, overall, at least for me, relatively disappointing. Um, and I say that because pretty much every single team I was rooting for lost in week nine. But, what are you going to do about it? Either way, let's get into it and let's get started. So first things first, we're going to start as always with Conference USA. They're doing those midweek games now. Um, and really the story uh, of Conference USA in week nine happened on Wednesday, and it really had shockwaves going throughout. And that was the Liberty versus Kennesaw State game. Now, if you went into that game and told me that you were expecting Kennesaw State to beat Liberty, you'd be lying. They started off the game with an 87% chance to win, and Liberty just really didn't show up. Their defense couldn't get stops, and Kennesaw State with a huge upset, one of the biggest upsets of the season up to this point. Um, who gives a hoot? The Owls do. So they get their first conference win, first win as an FBS team. Just it's what college football's all about right there. Just a um, beautiful story. Uh, Other than that, the Conference USA slate again a little bit disappointing. You had a 10-7 finish in the Sam Houston FIU game. Sam Houston now bowl eligible, so good for them. FIU one game away from being eliminated. And then UTEP is officially eliminated now. They lost to Louisiana Tech by 4, also on Tuesday. And then the only other game that happened was Middle Tennessee State versus Jacksonville State. And that one wasn't very close. I mean, Jacksonville State still undefeated in conference play, them in Western Kentucky, the only two. So, uh, again, bit of a disappointing CUSA slate with the exception of that Kennesaw State Liberty game. But some of the other conferences absolutely made up for it. Crazy week for the MAC. You had a rivalry game in the Battle of I-75. Bowling Green takes back uh, control of the rivalry. They lost it last year, but won the year before. So it seems like they're going back and forth. And whoever the home team is seems to get disappointed. Toledo, surprisingly, now 2-2 in conference play. Uh, they lost earlier to Buffalo in the season. So, bit disappointing for Jason Candle and that squad. I know they were hoping to sort of go back to the MAC title game. But, talking about like big games that I would say are quintessential MAC, uh, Ball State versus NIU. Um, just looking at that sort of win probability graph, it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Uh, NIU kicking a field goal with 15 seconds left to put them in the lead gives them a at the time 100% chance to win. Although they did surrender a 52-yard field goal and ended up losing that game So the Huskies, you know, after upsetting Notre Dame earlier on in the season, now a measly 1-3 in the MAC and 4-4 overall. So, that's certainly not ideal. They were ranked at one point this season, lest people forget. And then, another kind of surprising result, a team that's been truly terrible in Akron, comes from behind and able to escape with the win. Uh, they jumped out to an 18-0 lead over Eastern. Eastern responds with 21 straight points, and then a late touchdown from Akron uh, to give the Zips their first conference win well, first conference win since they beat Kent State last year, and then first conference win over a non-Kent State opponent in about 2 seasons. So big news for Akron, but uh, arguably the biggest news for the MAC moving forward is what's starting up next week. And that's midweek action, kind of puts a national spotlight on the conference. And I, for one, love it. Yes, there's also the election, whatnot, but I'm there for midweek action. So, you know, something to look out for sure. Uh, moving on to the Sun Belt, not not a lot of super notable things. Couple teams that were undefeated in conference do catch their first conference loss. Georgia Southern got blown out by Old Dominion on Thursday, and then ULM couldn't escape a road game at South Alabama. Also loses by a significant margin. Um, and then for the American, couple things here. Navy, unfortunately, their Cinderella season comes to an end. They lose to Notre Dame. Again, not particularly close either. Uh, East Carolina gets a nice win over Temple. They fired their coach last week, so it's good to see them sort of rebound, get back to 4-4, and try to compete to make a bowl game there. And then also Tulsa. I haven't really talked about Tulsa all season. They haven't really given me a reason to. Uh, you know, 2-5 going into this game, coming off a loss at Temple, but they respond back in a big way. A huge comeback, huge come from behind victory. No, they were trailing 35-7 at the half, and you know, worked their way all the way back and win it with a final score of 46-45. So, huge huge win there uh for Tulsa. I mean, first conference win for UTSA, that's it's pretty unacceptable. Jeff Traylor, again, good coach, I think, but that's one that your squad has to win if you're up by 28 at the half. And then finally, speaking of coaches, Rice finally gets rid of Mike Bloomgren. He's gone after a loss to UConn. So that's pretty much that for the American. Um, for the Mountain West, we have Boise State surviving on the road against ULM. They're still atop the Mountain West now. Um, that was a great game on Friday night. That Boise State versus ULM game, or sorry, UNLV game. Uh, 29-24 final score. Uh, UNLV held Ashton Genty to 128 yards and a touchdown, which that doesn't sound like you're holding him to something, but when it's Aston Genti, believe you me, it really is. But yeah, good back and forth game. And the difference really in this one just came down to turnovers. One turnover for UNLV, and that's pretty much all she wrote. And then going off of that, another. It's not surprising, but in a game between two sort of bottom feeders in the Mountain West, uh, Utah State gets their first conference win over Wyoming. Last second field goal. There were certainly some close games, but all told, this week was not one that I really I don't think that people are going to remember this week as much as some other ones. And then Colorado State, San Diego State are also still undefeated in conference play, so it's them and Boise are the three that don't have a conference loss yet. Now, San Diego State uh, did lose this week, but it was to Washington State, so you know, that doesn't count as a conference loss. They're not going to be part of the same conference until next year. So, Mountain West, the sort of path for the top of the Mountain West is thinning out a little bit now. But all told, that's not the worst thing out there. Moving on to the ACC, Thursday was a very telling game. A lot of people were sort of doubting Pitt, thinking that Pitt was fraudulent. Uh, that Pitt defense is legit. They forced five interceptions, and three of them returned for touchdowns just in the first half alone. Um, just dominating. Their offense didn't do much, but their offense didn't need to do much, to be honest. Uh, just a really fantastic performance by the Pitt Panthers. And then moving off of that, talking about plenty of turnovers, this SMU versus Duke game. SMU turned the ball over six times and won. That shouldn't make sense. Three lost fumbles, three interceptions, and they still win. This SMU team uh, is completely different under Kevin Jennings. And, they're a team that uh, is pretty scary with him at the helm. Because it seems like he's getting into a bit more of a rhythm. Does have to turn down the turnovers. They want to make a deep conference run there. And then finally, for the ACC, I want to talk about Boston College. Now, for a lot of you, you might not know based on just accent alone, I am from Boston. So Boston College, technically my hometown team. Uh, I was never the hugest Boston College fan, but I do root for them uh, over a decent amount of teams. And BC has a problem. BC has an allergy, if you will, because they're allergic to holding on to a lead when they have one. And it is very pervasive. They just can't do it. They have like either a slow start and can't come from behind, or they have a quick start and then give up in the second half. They only play one half of football, whether that's the first or the second half. Let's talk about the looking back to the Missouri game. It was 14-3. Then Missouri crawls all the way back, score 5 straight scores for the Tigers before a late touchdown tries to cut it back into it for BC. That's a loss. You look at the Virginia game. BC has a 14-0 lead. Virginia scores the final 24, ends up winning that game. Let's look at the Virginia Tech game then. Virginia Tech game, they don't show up for the first half. They find themselves down 28-0 at the half. Crawl all the way back to make it a 21-28 game and then give up two more touchdowns in the fourth quarter to lose that one 42-21. And then finally, let's look at this Louisville game. Most recent game. BC starts out with a 20-0 victory. 20-0 lead, I should say. And it slowly whittled away. And the final 21 points scored by Louisville to win the game. BC needs to play a whole game of football. And I know it's going to be tough, though. But I would argue that this game coming up this week against Syracuse, or pardon me, not this week, next week against Syracuse is must win. Because looking at their schedule, who they have left, they have a home game against Syracuse, which it's a Syracuse team that looked pretty pedestrian this past week against Pitt. A road game at SMU, who is undefeated in conference play, only has a single loss to a strong BYU team. Then a home game against North Carolina, which again could be winnable. Although North Carolina did perform well in their game against Virginia, a team that beat Boston College. And then closing the season with a home game against Pitt, a Pitt team who demolished the Syracuse team that is coming to town in 2 weeks. BC, if they want to make a bowl game, needs to win two of these games. So they need two wins. Syracuse and North Carolina are the two that I'm seeing out of the remaining four on their schedule. But that's asking a lot. They need to play a full, complete game. Moving on to the Big 12. TCU came all the way back to beat Texas Tech. Very good game. Very close game. Ended with a missed Texas Tech field goal that would have gave them the win there. But yeah, very back and forth contest. Included a fake field goal as well, which, I don't know if you're keeping track of fake field goals, but those always are kind of fun. BYU dominant over UCF. BYU continuing to sort of rake against some of these Big 12 teams. Colorado continuing to look impressive. They got a nice win over a quality Cincinnati team. And then finally, Kansas versus Kansas State, Sunflower Showdown, big time rivalry game. Kansas State wins for the 16th year in a row. The Jayhawks just cannot get over the hump and beat the Kansas State Wildcats. And, very disappointing season for Kansas. They started off the season ranked. They're 2-6 now. Very disappointing. Could be eliminated from bowl games uh, either in any of the next 3 weeks. They got a difficult schedule coming up versus Iowa State, at BYU, versus Colorado, and finishing the season with a road game at Baylor. I could honestly see them only winning one of those games. And I wouldn't be surprised by it. But that'll do it for the Big Ten. Oh, sorry, Big 12. Let's move on to the Big Ten. Oregon dismantled Illinois with ease. It wasn't close. Uh, Now, I still think that Illinois is a good team this year, but another loss for the Illini. They're 6-2, but two quality losses on their schedule against Penn State and Oregon. So, not terrible there. They have a game against Minnesota this week, which I think can get them to bowl eligibility. Easy back half of the schedule for them, relatively speaking. Talking about just teams in the Big Ten, Minnesota and Michigan State both at home, and then finally road games against Rutgers and Northwestern. I think those are pretty winnable games for them there. Uh, Moving forward, talking about Penn State, uh, they lost Drew Aller for the second half. It didn't seem to matter. Uh, the backup came in, played well enough. Bo Pribula might be a name we have to start learning soon. Uh, but yeah, Penn State staying undefeated before a big time game against Ohio State coming up this next week. And then finally, speaking of Ohio State, they were on upset alert early on in the day before they were able to just barely escape against Nebraska. Uh, Late interception from Dylan Raiola really sealed that one. But they were trailing uh, in the fourth quarter. So bit of a warning sign maybe for Ohio State. And then finally, let's get to the SEC. The big game in the SEC was during the night slate. It was Texas A&M versus LSU. LSU looked like they were in control of the game in the first half. Then second half, Texas A&M just comes all the way back under Marcel Reed. Interesting to note that it's Marcel Reed, not Connor Wegman. So that might be something to look out for in the future. But, for LSU, disappointing to take a conference loss there. Now the game against Alabama in a couple weeks is going to be an elimination game for both of them because Bama won their game against my Missouri Tigers 34 to nothing. It was not pretty. Uh, Honestly, the Bama offense didn't really look like it was in a great rhythm. Missouri defense really held on for a lot of that game. Uh, when Brady Cook was on the field, the offense wasn't moving that well, but they were moving better than when Drew Pine was on the field because Drew Pine was really excelling at completing passes to Alabama, which would be great if he was the Alabama quarterback, not not the Mizzou quarterback. So yeah, good timing for a bye week for Mizzou. Hopefully Brady Cook can rest up and get healthy before this game against Oklahoma. Try to salvage the season. I know they're 6-2. I know they're still technically a top 25 team. Looking at how they've played against SEC opponents on the road, I don't know that they deserve I don't know that they deserve that moniker of being a top 25 team. They have played pretty rough. And I think that if Brady Cook is in the offense, that's great. Drew Pine is a football terrorist and he deserves to be benched for eternity. Um, yeah. So thoughts and prayers out to Brady Cook. Please get healthy for the game against Oklahoma. Please and thank you. Um, and then finally, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, or sorry, Vanderbilt versus Texas. Uh, very close game. Uh, extremely close game, but Texas able to hold on with a 3-point victory over Vandy. Real back and forth type game. Um, Vanderbilt scored the first touchdown, sort of let it up from there. But that will do it for the reaction recap. I want to start a new segment starting up this week, which is talking about uh, the postseason because we can actually start looking at that now as teams start to become bowl eligible or start to become eliminated from competing in bowl games. Let's look at the eliminated teams first. So, goodbye to Florida State. They were a team that had a lot of aspirations coming into the season, just could not fulfill those. Again, preseason top 10 team now eliminated from bowl contention by week 9. Absolutely absurd. So, UTEP, new coaching staff, but it hasn't worked in year one. We'll see how it goes when Scotty Waldron has his own sort of recruits in and is able to better rebuild the roster. Wyoming, when they lost Craig Bowl, they lost pretty much their whole team. It's offensive identity, defensive identity. They're just really bad this year. Same with Mississippi State. They haven't been the same since Mike Leach unfortunately passed away. Southern Miss already fired their coach. They're just sort of at this point playing to play spoiler. And then Troy, when John Summerall left, again, they lost pretty much every bit of their team that was performing well. So interesting to note, couple coaching changes. UTEP with a first-year head coach, Wyoming with a first-year head coach, Mississippi State with a first-year head coach, Troy with a first-year head coach, and then Southern Miss already fired theirs. The only outlier there is Florida State. So we'll see what they do with Mike Norvell at the end of the season if they decide to keep him or not. And then also bowl bound teams that are on their way to the postseason in some facets. So teams that have reached that 6-win threshold: Tulane, uh, Colorado, Ohio State, Sam Houston, Boise State, Alabama, and James Madison. Congratulations to you. You have at least secured a spot in a bowl game. So applause, applause, applause. Even if you lose out the rest of the season, you will still make one. So good for them. Now let's take a look, a little look-see at the AP poll, final AP poll that actually matters, because after this, it will be the college football playoff poll that is happening on uh, Tuesday the 5th. So, yes, on election night, there is going to be a college football playoff poll. There's also going to be midweek action. Very eventful day throughout all of the U.S., but especially in the college football world as well. Oregon, Georgia, and Penn State, as well as Ohio State, all stay, oh, pardon me, all stay where they are. Miami moves up one after a dominant win versus Florida State. Texas moves down one after a close win against Vanderbilt. Not surprising. Notre Dame catapulting up after a win against ranked Navy in dominant fashion. BYU moves up a couple. Texas A&M moves up a couple. Um, Clemson and Iowa State both drop on their bye week. They're tied at 11. And then LSU drops a significant amount, drops 8 spots all the way down to 16. Uh, Boise State, Alabama, both up a little bit. Uh, SMU on the rise, Pitt on the rise, Kansas State drops one after a close one. Ole Miss also drops one. Then a couple teams down at the bottom of the polls that are finally getting some love, getting ranked again. Washington State, Colorado, both receiving ranking. And then uh, both Illinois and Missouri, after uh, pretty bad losses to top tier teams, are receiving votes. Missouri barely ranked, 44 total votes, and Vanderbilt, a team that they beat, with 41. Memphis, Tulane, finally getting some love in the polls. UNLV and Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, getting some poll love as well. But that will pretty much do it for this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry about the different setup, but hopefully this little abbreviated episode will help quell all your Zeke college football needs. With that being said, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you all in the next video.